Hello, welcome. This is Anime Zone. Today I will be discussing Erased, what I like about it, and some of my problems with it as well. Now, this isn't a review, this is a discussion, so the difference between them is that my reviews have a format that it follows, and my discussions do not. It's just about anything, right? This will contain spoilers, so you have been warned. When it comes to Erased, it's a show that I've known about for a very long time. And unlike my other videos, this will have more, it would have like an equal balance of good stuff and bad stuff from the show. Normally, I don't like to talk about the bad things in shows, but this is a discussion, and I have some problems that I really wanna mention. So yeah, the first thing though, I want to start off with the good about the show. When it comes to characters and character caring for each other, I think the show really succeeds at portraying that. Because the story is about Satoru trying to save Kayo from being killed and also trying to save her from her abusive family, right? This is Satoru's goal for like the first 9 episodes of the show. And I believe that the first 9 episodes of the show are just great in terms of him and her friendship. When I started the show, I went in blind. I didn't know anything apart from there's a kid and he's the main character. So I was glad to find out that there was a 29-year-old inside a kid's body, because this gave his kid self a mature personality. Usually when it comes to kid characters, they make brash and are annoying and they make dumb decisions a lot of the times, and that bothers me more times than it doesn't. I mean, I'm not really a big fan of kids in real life, so I don't think I would like them in shows. Kids' characters are not always handled bad. For example, this show really handles them well, and also a show like The Promised Neverland handles kids' characters well too. But anyways, I was just so happy that none of the kid characters bothered me and just like annoyed me. Okay, I'll talk about Kayo for a little second now. When she was first introduced, I thought she was going to be a tsundere. She was giving off the tsundere vibes. But that's not the case, because she gives into Satoru's friendship pretty fast. She was just acting that way. She was hesitant at first because it was weird, right? She's not used to it. She doesn't have a lot of friends, and someone going up to her and asking her, yeah, I want to be friends, and there's no ulterior motive to that. It just caught her off guard, I would say, and she just had to like realize that, oh yeah, he really does want to be my friend. And once she did realize that, she accepted it, and the beautiful friendship rose from that. Now, on that same note, the scenes where Kayo was getting abused by her mom, those were very well handled, as in how they were shot and how they made me feel, because I hated to see it. It was hard to watch and I hated it. The fact that I felt such a strong hate for it shows how good they handled both Kayo's character, because they made me care about her, and also the scenes itself, because they were just they were not nice to watch, right? Um, like Kayo's like whole thing where you have like um Satoru is trying to save her from the abused family. Um, I mean, if you would have just told me that there's a kid and she's being abused, and they already showed me the bruises, right? And they already told me that, I was already behind Satoru saving her. But after watching those scenes, I was really, really behind it. And I don't want to bash on the West too much, but you don't see stories like this often. At least I don't, because I don't watch a lot of movies, right? But stories like this shouldn't be shy. You shouldn't shy away from it. Kind of like how when you see the Joker, that was controversial and all of that shit. If the Joker was an anime, it wouldn't be controversial. Because one thing I like about the Japanese people is that they're so open-minded when it comes to storytelling. They have a lot of creative freedom, I would say, and not bounded by all of those, oh, you can't have this and this and that. So this shows scenes like this shows like the impact that having these types of characters, having this type of story can have on a viewer. And yeah, the show, I would say, was well produced and the animation is great. The characters are good too, but there are two scenes in particular that really stuck out for me. The first one is when Satoru is walking her home This is the second time he came back. He's walking her home from her birthday. The first time he walked her home, she never came back the next day because she was murdered, right? So to prevent this, when they're walking, he stops and then he asks her if he can kidnap her. And she responds with, "You're an idiot," and saying yes. Her catchphrase, her usual catchphrase. And the interesting thing about this scene and why I like it so much is not only because it's heartwarming and so sincere, but also because it gives an insight on Kaio's character, because she wants to be saved. She's accepting Satoru's help at that moment. She's accepting it because she knows that what he means is, let me take you away from your mom. And if she gets caught by the mom, she would get beat even more. Kind of like when he invites her to go to that place with him and for that date, right, quote unquote. And she was hesitant because she knows how the mom is. But Satoru never gives up. Never gave up in trying to open up and take her out of that situation as much as he could. And this scene was just so beautiful, with her accepting his help and proceeding to go along with his crazy plan. Yeah, and this scene leads up to my most favorite scene. There's like a build up to it, and I want to describe this scene in the most detail that I can, so that I can like fully express how much I love it. So yeah, Satoru is hiding Kaio from her mom and the killer at the same time. He's hiding her at some bus place, right? But when the killer shows up to leave the equipment, not knowing that Kaio is there, right? And for one of his future victims, that's when Satoru decides that it's not safe for her there, and he decides to take her home where the mom is waiting, right? And she asks, "What's all this about?" And he says he's helping a friend out. By the way, the mom, such a great character. I really liked her. But yeah, I digress. So after scenes of some really heartwarming scenes of them eating and the mom taking a shower with Kaio, there's this funny scene where they're in the bed and the mom asks if she's in the way because she went in the middle of them, right? But this is where my favorite scene comes on. Kaio wakes up. Satoru's just got up as well. Satoru's mom is already up and she's in the kitchen. Kaio walks into the kitchen and she looks down, and what she sees is a delicious plate of food waiting for her and made just for her. The camera then changes into a downward angle where we can see her face from the bottom up, and her expression, right? Then the camera shifts again to her point of view through her eyes, and with every blink, it shows what she used to eat, or what she's used to eating every day. That being noodles, a piece of bread, or just some small pocket change for her to see what she's gonna buy with that, right? That way of using the camera was really nice, I believe. Then we show her in the park, and she's there eating what she bought with the small pocket change in the cold, and she's alone, and it really makes you feel bad for her right in that moment. And that's when we cut back and the camera is looking down on the plate of food, and a tear drops on the table. Then the camera goes back to the angle it was before, looking at her from down up, and she's crying. She has so many tears, and this is such a different contrast to what she had before, because when we were seeing it through her perspective, her noodles and everything, she always had a face of disdain. She's used to it. It was normal. But her crying, her breaking down, that was just so great. And she just kept crying for the rest of the scene. Sato's mom walks up and comforts her, and the scene just ends. It goes to black. Wow, right? That was a powerful scene. It gave me chills, and it shows the power that storytelling has. This is why I think this was the point where I was like, damn, this show is great. this show is amazing. Because it really it can pull off scenes like this, which that any show that can pull off a scene that makes me feel that way, it's great. But it furthers my disappointment in that I will discuss later. But when this show is great, it's great, and nothing can take away from that. And this is my favorite scene, and I could talk about it for so much longer than I did here. But I'm gonna cut this short. Despite all my love for that scene, and just from episode 1 to episode 9, pretty much I just had a strong love for those episodes. Now we get into my problems with it, which is usually leads to the ending part. Now, I'm not someone who thinks that the ending is paramount. Some YouTubers that I watch, like Glass Reflection and the Anime Man, think that endings are paramount, but I don't think so. I think it's the journey and the destination. All of it makes the picture, right? All of it is a part of the big puzzle. And just because the ending wasn't what you wanted, maybe that doesn't discard the journey that you took to get there. Now, I always heard that this was a great show, but with a bad ending. And after watching the show, I can safely say that I don't think the ending was bad at all. What I think is that the ending was disappointing. Now, the reason why I think that the ending was disappointing has to do with two problems that I had with how they dealt with particular storylines. And I think that by fixing these storylines in the beginning of the story, it would have helped out in the ending, and I will explain further in a little bit. But first, let me tell you what these problems I had was. The first thing was the killer. Now, I knew who the killer was the moment they first introduced him, right? It was obvious, and I think that was the point, because the writer of the story never once tried to make you think that it wasn't him, right? So what this did was that it changed what I expected from the story at that point, because if you're gonna make it obvious, then you have something else to offer, right? Because it's not always about the mystery. Now that the killer was obvious, right, I thought it was gonna be like, Satoru figures it out and uses the information that he had from the past or present to figure it out. It doesn't matter, right? And what happened was that now he would have a rivalry with the killer, but that didn't happen. Satoru never once tried to figure out who the killer was, and that surprised me when I first watched it. He didn't pick up on any of the clues neither, because he wasn't looking for them, right? Now he finally realizes who the killer was when the killer basically tells him himself, right? And at that point, I thought that one, Satoru was dumb for not trying to figure out the killer, and two was, yes, finally, we're gonna get some rivalry, we're gonna get some back and forth, right? Because that's what I was waiting for after that whole beautiful thing with Kaya was done. But that didn't happen. What the writer decided to do was put him in a coma, and he woke up later, like years later, with amnesia. At this point was when I realized that I wouldn't say realize, I would say this is a point when I thought that maybe the author doesn't know how to proceed the story with Satoru knowing who the killer was. Maybe he just didn't know where to go if Satoru knew, right? But I think that's one of the biggest problems with the ending. By restarting it, right? By basically going, because I was invested in the present time or the past time in that point. I was invested in the kids when he was a kid, when he is a kid. He's in the body of the kid. In those times, I was invested in that past time. But now we go back into the future. We progress there. Now it reboots. My investment reboots because now I have to get accustomed to this new environment, and it's already like the second to last episode. And I was too happy that he finally figured out who the killer was and they were gonna get back and forth. So getting this disappointed me immediately, because I was like, okay, it doesn't matter. Maybe they will still have some nice interactions, but they cannot have that back and forth anymore now, because they took that away the moment the writer decided to do the time jump. And that's fine, right? But what really wasn't fine is that he confronts the killer in the last episode, right, when he regains his memories. And the writer tries to sell me on the fact that that the killer can't live without Satoru, or the Satoru gave his life meaning or something like that. It tried to insinuate that they had a bigger connection, but I disagree because they didn't. They interacted a lot, yes, as teacher and as student, but never as killer and as a future man trying to save, his friends. And I think that's what was missing for the ending. It would have hit harder if they had a rivalry, if they had a back and forth and push and pull throughout the whole story, and then the killer just did the checkmate, but he never died and he still came back. Now this is where my idea into fixing the story came in, without changing how the ending actually plays out. I think this would have made the ending better. Now here it is. The first thing is, I think they should have that Satoru should have figured out who the killer was sooner, and I think he should have figured it out, not just being told by the killer, right? Because this way it would be they could have a rivalry with each other, a push and pull, right? Satoru trying to stop him, the killer just trying to kill. The second one is, I think the story should have taken advantage of the time travel element, because the story does have time travel, but it only uses it as a way for the plot to happen, not in the plot, if that makes sense. But either way, just imagine this. Imagine Satoru knowing who the killer is. Now imagine the killer knowing that Satoru knows who he is. And imagine two of them going at each other, the killer having the physical advantage because Satoru is stuck in a child's body, and he has the trust of people because no one's gonna believe Satoru if he just starts blabbing out that he's the killer, because he's such a kind man to the eyes of everybody else, right? And Satoru being stuck in a corner because he wants to protect Kaio, he wants to protect the other kids, but he also needs to find proof. He needs to catch him in the act. He needs to one-up him at every turn, but he has the advantage. The only thing that Satoru has is his time travel power. Now, I think this is what would have made it better if the killer did something and Satoru reacted. Sometimes he wouldn't have to go back in time to fix it, but when most of the times the killer would one-up him, right? And when the killer one-ups him, Satoru would go back and then one-up the killer, knowing what the killer's plan was. This would have fixed so much. This back and forth. And in the final scene where two of them are talking in the car and he tries to drown Satoru, and Satoru yells at him, "I know your future." And that did haunt him because he asks him that when he wakes up from the coma. This would have made more sense, wouldn't it? Because the killer would have been the more that he tries to kill, and the more that Satoru somehow just knows what he was trying to do and always interrupted him, the more his curiosity of how does he know would grow, and the more likely it is that he would believe him when he's like, "I know your future. I know your future," right? So it would have haunted him because it's like he did know all of my plans, and he always was one step ahead and stopped me. And he was always like one step above, right? Or whatever. I already said that, but the point is that scene would have had more impact. And now imagine we go back to present time with all of that changes added, right? We go back to when he wakes up from the coma and they confront each other. Now they have that connection. Now it would make sense why the killer stopped killing after Satoru ended up in a coma, because after that thrilling game that he had with him trying to kill and him trying to stop him, and he just had so much fun that going back to just killing without no obstacles was just not, it wasn't good enough, right? And that's why he needed Satoru to give his life meaning, because his meaning before was to kill, but now the game was so much fun that it didn't make any more sense to him, right? To keep killing without Satoru interrupting him. And this would impact so much more in the story. It would also like give a bigger impact when he asked him, "How did you always know?" And he tells him, "That's because I knew your future," right? And if he wants, you can reveal the time travel aspect. I don't really care about that point. But the point is that he would have had that connection, and that scene would have made such a big impact on the killer, more than it already did in the show, or more than the show tried to sell me on that it did. And I think that this way it would have been more satisfying, because I don't think the ending was bad. I don't think like the choices that the writer made were bad. I just think he could have handled the beginning parts better to make that ending work better as well. And That way it would have gone more seamlessly. That's one way to like better the ending and not make it as disappointing as it was, without changing the ending entirely and just with the same plot story beats, right? So yeah, that was my opinion on how I think the ending would have been improved. Now you may be wondering, but if he did that, then you would have to like sacrifice a lot of scenes, right? Because where would you have time to put that? And I think that you would have to sacrifice the scenes where he's being chased by the police officer and his main love interest, which was the teenage girl. I would say was his main love interest. I would cut off those scenes because I don't think they were necessary. He never really used any of the information from the future. Like, sure, he used them to like maybe to figure out who he was gonna strike at, right? But like he could have figured that out by just time leaping over and over, right? And then it would have added a bigger thrill of him having to use information from the past and some that he knew from the present, from the setup of the story, right? I think that would have been a better way. And that way, like, we cut off all that scene of him being chased and we add that to fill it in with more Kaio and Kaio scenes, him and trying to like stop the killer, and him and the killer going back and forth with each other. Because it would be hard, wouldn't it? He doesn't have to win, he doesn't have to find proof. It could end up with him being in a coma again. I just think that would be the perfect setup, and it would have bettered the story. I still think the story is great though, despite its flaws. The ending was just disappointing, but apart from that, I think that from episode 1 to 9 it was amazing, and if it could have kept going that way, it would have probably ended up in my favorites list. The ending just brought it down from like amazing to just great, you know what I mean? And yeah. Overall though, Erase is definitely worth your time, and despite its flaws, it has some amazing scenes and some amazing moments and just great characters in general. So if you haven't watched it and you somehow decided to watch this discussion, then go, by all means, go watch it. But yeah, this will be the end of the video. So thank you for listening and have a nice day.